Hello, thank you for joining me. I'm here today to talk to you about a book that I published earlier this year titled The Labyrinth of Rooms, an Architectural Allegory. And this particular presentation is one that I have already given on Tuesday, October 22nd in the College of Architecture in Kuwait University. But I thought I'd record it just so that more people can listen and learn about the book. So the presentation is divided into three parts. First, I will talk about the origins of the book, so how the idea developed, where it came from, because it's quite a long story. And then I will talk about what is in the book itself, so its content. And then finally, I will try to contextualize the book in architectural discourse and, let's say, literary discourse, so that it doesn't appear to have kind of come out of nowhere. Okay, so in terms of where the book came from, this is the picture. This is a picture that shows the cover of the book itself. The story starts in 2021 when I participated in a artist residency hosted every year by Sedu House, Beit Sedu in Kuwait. So what they do, they invite maybe 4 or 5 younger artists. They give them workshops about Sedu. Sedu is a kind of traditional Bedouin weaving that we have here in the region. So they give these artists workshops about Sedu. They give them lectures about kind of the culture of Sedu, the history of Sedu, and then they ask these artists to produce contemporary art being inspired by Sedu. So they want to bridge Sedu from a kind of traditional way of weaving, a traditional art form, and bring it to the contemporary world. And so this was my installation at the end of the residency. There's an exhibition for all the artists, and this is what I came up with. It had 3 parts. So on the right, you can see on the podiums, there was an art book that I published. And then at the very back, you can see a large print. And then on the left, there was a 3D printed game that I also created related to the theme. I will focus on the artwork at the back. So what I enjoyed most about Sedu, so here you can see an example of Sedu. What I enjoyed most was a part of the Sedu weave. So you can see that the Sedu weave is made out of these strips of colors. There is one part called the Shajara weave, or Naqshat al-Shajara. And you can see several of them here. So you can see it at the bottom. It's usually, unlike the other kind of colorful bands, it's usually black and white. It is the most intricate, so it has a lot of detail. It's also non-repetitive, so you can see there are consecutive patterns that are different, each one having its significance and meaning for the weaver that created it. So I was mostly interested in that part of the Sedu weave. And if you zoom into a piece of Sedu, you will also notice that the way it's weaved together results in a kind of pixelation effect. So the consecutive colors are almost like little squares. For the Shajara weave, it's squares of either white or black. And so I had this idea of pixelation, and then I had this idea of consecutive black and white patterns. That was kind of the initial stimulus for me for the Sedu residency. And I thought that just like the traditional weavers were being inspired by either ideas or things in their own Bedouin environment and turning those ideas into the patterns that they created, I wanted to apply the same process, let's say, for me as someone living in the 21st century. So I, I came up with a template of 15 by 15 pixels, and I limited myself to black and white and gray pixels. And I wanted to create as many icons of things that we find around us as I could. So things in the, say, in our world. They could be, as you can see in the image, like a key, a city, a turtle, a hand, a mosque, a robot, a nose. So some things are biological, some of them are natural, some of them are industrial, and so on. And so just like the weavers, they kind of place their patterns next to each other in these long strips. I also placed my my icons, my pixel artworks next to each other to create these long bands of. They don't mean anything in particular. So it's not like reading a sentence. It's not like hieroglyphs or hieroglyphics. But it's more like artworks that each just symbolize something. And I thought this was closer to the ideal or the idea of Sedu than to turn it into something with a specific meaning. It just kind of inspires certain thoughts or certain images in your mind. And so once the residency ended and I presented that project, I was still interested in pixel art. And I was also interested in this idea of little images that are placed next to each other. But because of my kind of architectural education, I wanted my next project to have an architectural dimension. So I thought, how can I turn this pixelation and this kind of consecutive artworks into something architectural? And the idea I came up with was that what if each, instead of having an artwork, each one was a design of a floor plan for a room. And then once you place these rooms next to each other, you would get a path that connects all the rooms together, basically a labyrinth. So instead of an image of a key and a house and a mosque, you get room after room after room after room. And here you can see some of the initial sketches where I was trying to design what kind of shapes the rooms would have, what kinds of backgrounds they would have, and also in what order they would go. From sketches, I moved on to Illustrator, where you can see here the file that I was working on. So I created the same thing with these templates. I designed the rooms. You can see the rooms start a bit simpler. So they start with a square, a rectangle, and then as I go along, they become more complicated, but still just using the simple template of a 15 by 15 pixel. This is a close-up of some of the rooms. And you can see that they also had a pixelated pattern and the gradient. And the idea at this point was to just create an artwork, which was this. So my goal was to create a kind of interesting artwork of a labyrinth. So it had a aesthetic quality. It also had a, let's say, inherent architectural idea or concept. And maybe I would print it as a poster or kind of use it as digital art. So from the artist residency, I turned it into a architectural artwork. But because I started to enjoy this idea of kind of room after room after room, I also started thinking of it as a story. So the next phase of the project was that I thought, what if I imagine a person actually walking along these rooms from room to another, and then what would they do in each room? What would they think? What would they say? How would they act? So from a artwork, it turned into, or it developed also a literary component. So I thought of this as an Instagram project, and I thought I would write little passages, little vignettes for each room. And here you can see some of them, the early drafts. So each room would have very few a few words, but those words would be they would be at the intersection of both architecture, philosophy, storytelling. So the person walks along the labyrinth and they think about their life, they think about the shape of the room, and there would be a interesting interaction between the shape of the room they're in and the thoughts that they were having. So connections between ideas and physical space. And this is the result of the Instagram project. You can see these are the feeds. So the gradient also kind of helps create a kind of a unified look. Each post had two images. So the first image would be the shape of the room, and the second image would be this kind of black square with the writing in it. And they would, the way the corridors were placed would make the rooms continuous always. And then once I was done with the Instagram project, I thought more seriously of maybe turning it into a book. So I was enjoying this idea even more. So I thought about publishing. I thought whether I should self-publish it, whether I should contact a publisher, which kind of publisher. And so here you can see I created a document where I was imagining how this Instagram project will turn into a book. So one major difference was that I turned all the images into black and white, kind of removed the background, just because I thought it would be more attractive to publishers, because it would be much easier to print, much cheaper to print. And then on the right, you can see also the kinds of layouts that I was creating. So I rewrote the stories. The text related to each room became a little bit longer. I worked on it a little bit more, just so that it's kind of more, let's say, worthy of being printed on paper rather than for Instagram. And I started contacting many publishers, and eventually the publisher ORO Editions accepted the book, and the kind of official publishing process started. So I also worked with, once I kind of got the approval from ORO Editions, I contacted Sharaf from Sharaf Studio, a graphic designer from Kuwait, to also design the book. So even though I had, as you saw, a kind of general template for how I wanted the book to be, so each page would be a room. The room would be at the top of the page, the text at the bottom. And so as you flip through the book, you also flip through, you move through the labyrinth. And so the rooms would be connected from page to page, and then each text would be related to the room at the top. But I thought having a professional graphic designer would elevate the quality of the book more than I could, let's say, manage. And it was true. So these are some of the cover ideas that Mohammed Sharaf came up with. The one in the middle is the one we ended up going with. I liked it because it was a very kind of an honest image, because it has all the rooms on the cover itself. So even before you buy the book or you open it, you basically see everything that's in the book, at least graphically. And I like this kind of honesty and straightforwardness. And I also contacted my thesis advisor from my time in the University of Michigan, John McMorrough, to write a foreword for the book, to also contextualize it. And as you can see at the bottom of the cover, the book has a foreword by John McMorrough that also contextualizes the book in architectural discourse, architectural thinking. once the book was published, I wanted to launch the book and I wanted to share it. I also had artworks that I had created that were related to the idea of pixelation, to rooms, that were kind of done separately from the book itself. So I put together an exhibition in Kuwait in Sharaf Studios. And this is the room where the exhibition took place. As you can see, there are artworks on the wall, but also on the left or on the right, you can see the original poster, and you can see the pages of the book pasted on the wall. So it was both an art exhibition and a book launch. And so I thought it's interesting, even though it's maybe a bit long-winded story. It's interesting to me to think about how the project went through different phases. So it started as an art residency about Sedu, kind of traditional weaving. Then it became a digital artwork. Then it became an Instagram project. Then it became a book. Then it became an exhibition. And then it became a public talk. And so it's, at least for me, it's interesting to contemplate how the project moves through phase to phase, keeping its kind of DNA intact. So this is the second part of the talk, and I will talk about what is in the book itself. So as I said, the book imagines a person walking through the labyrinth. The book starts with this person waking up in the first room. The first room is the square room. So this person wakes up in the room. They don't know from where they came. They don't know who they are. And they simply, all they have is the shape of the space that they are in, or the shape of the room that they are in, this geometry, and a path, a corridor that takes them from room to room. And as they move along, they think, they contemplate, they learn things, they consider their situation, their humanity. And this person is only referred to as human. So it's trying to maybe make statements, philosophical statements about being and existence in general, rather than about a specific character, even though specificity is not avoidable. But I will kind of claim that the book has four things, four elements or four features. So the first thing is that the book has art. So this is in two simple ways. One, it has the art of the shape of the room, so the pixel art, which went through many phases, as you saw, and ended up took this form for the book. So this is the art that you see at the top of each page, but also the graphic design. So the design of each page, the way the text is designed, the way the shape of the page is designed. It is meant to also be a kind of an artistic book design, a unique book design that is not common. So where each page is not just a page, but also a space, and then flipping through the book is also moving along space in a very, let's say, intentional way. Also, I would say that the book it's also a book of architectural theory. So as the character moves along, they contemplate architectural concepts, architectural themes that we often talk about in architecture school, in very kind of simple and literary ways. So, for example, this person, depending on the shape of the room, they might contemplate the relationship between the center and the periphery, architecture that forces you through one path versus architecture that gives you many options, the sequence of the rooms, so how the sequence of rooms affects their experience of going through, the relationship between shape and feeling, the idea of how to decide which room is better or which architecture is better, so choice, judgment, architecture that encourages movement versus architecture that encourages them to pause. So all these architectural themes. So as the person reads through the book, they are also introduced. Maybe they are a student or someone just interested in architecture in general. They will be exposed to these architectural concepts and ideas in a very kind of accessible and literary way, rather than in a dense or kind of academic writing. Also, I will say that the book is a philosophical book, or it includes philosophical thinking, and this is not philosophy maybe with a capital P, so not very high-minded philosophy, or very what we associate philosophy with difficulty and kind of complicated ideas. It's more of it's philosophy in the way where we are all philosophical thinkers as humans. We all contemplate our lives. We all contemplate where we came from. We all think about our experience. We all reflect on then who we are. And so it is philosophy in that sense. It's kind of an everyday pedestrian philosophy. Some of the philosophical themes that come up include, for example, this person, as they are moving along the labyrinth, they consider the limits of their knowledge. So how much can they know about the rooms that they are in? They consider the idea of free will, whether they are being forced to move or they are choosing to move through the rooms. And they consider the idea of meaning. So do these shapes mean something? What does it mean to mean? How do they choose between being stationary or moving or going forward or going backwards? So all these kind of mixed in with architectural ideas are also philosophical ideas. And finally, the book is a literary book. So it has literature. It is not, it is written to be an enjoyable text to read. And alongside that, it's meant to be also to have a diverse group of writing styles and writing modes put together. So each room is written as a almost separate vignette. It could be a prose poem almost. So they are related in that they show one journey, but they are separate in like consecutive poems maybe, or consecutive vignettes and passages. Some of them are in the mode of storytelling. Some of them are more about description. Some of them are more poetic. Some of them are in dialogue. So the person talks to the room or talks to other entities. Some of them are lists, and some of them are maybe more in the mode of architectural theory. And so that diversity is kind of tries to explore the very simplicity of kind of pixel rooms, but tries to explore it in as many ways as possible, but also gives the reader kind of stops the reading process from being monotonous. And so they keep encountering different ways of writing and maybe different voices. Yeah, and so this kind of short, humble book of 80 pages, I think has it is artistic, it is architectural, it is philosophical, and it is literary. And finally, this is the last part of the presentation where I want to contextualize the book, and specifically, I want to contextualize it in three ways. So the first way is of rooms as building blocks. The second is stories as theory, and the third is space as metaphor. And I will kind of go through each of them. So first, because the book takes as its structure room after room in a labyrinth, it does conceptualize architecture as being most fundamentally a collection of rooms. The space that is being experienced is not large and open but rather enclosed, encapsulated in defined rooms. And in architecture, we can see different trends in history where some architects try to create more open, integrated space. Some of them try to create more enclosed, defined rooms. So Louis Kahn, in this famous sketch, and more generally in his work, famously kind of emphasizes the structure of the room as a building block of architecture. So he says the room is the beginning of architecture. He also says the plan is a society of rooms, and this is maybe a good description for the book itself. So the book is, and the labyrinth that the book describes is a society of rooms. We can look at architectural projects, like architects that have thought in this way, thought in terms of rooms rather than kind of open, connected space. So this is the Richards Medical Research Laboratories by Louis Kahn. And you can easily see from the plan how the different spaces, the laboratories, are clearly separated as squares and then connected by corridors. So this is the shape of the room is emphasized quite sharply. Another example is John Hedgehog in the one-half house. You can see from the plan where one or two rooms are put together in this very defined shape. So the building it's not one big form and it encapsulates the whole building, but the building is separated into clear shapes that are supposed to be appreciated on their own. So you have the triangular space, you have the semicircular space, you have the rectangular space, and those are also connected with corridors. Another example, we have the 21st Century Museum of Contemporary Art by Sana, and you can see, even though there is kind of one shape that brings all the rooms together, once we see the plan, we can see that the rooms are all pulled apart. They have different shapes and sizes and scales. Even from the aerial view, you can see that the rooms have different heights. And so even though a circle brings them all together, each room is given its own character and has its own presence. So this is just to say that the idea of focusing on rooms in architecture, which the book endorses or takes as its base, is something that kind of we have seen many times in architectural history. The second is that the fact that the book is, as I said, makes some theoretical points, but it's written as a story. It's interesting to ask also, has this been done before, or where does this come from? And so the idea of stories being written as architectural theory is also, when we look at architectural discourse and architectural history, we can see that this is a long-standing practice. It has been done or practiced by architects for hundreds of years. They have written stories that make architectural point. Of the examples here, the oldest is Adolf Loos's The Poor Little Rich Man. The newest is the one in the bottom right, the Master Plan by Rainer de Graaf. And then you can see other groups like Super Studio. You can see Ram Koolhaas, Keith Mitnick, Jimenez Lai have all written different kinds of stories, all making architectural ideas more approachable or differently explained than what is generally expected of theory, which is to be written as an article or an essay. And a famous example from our region is Hassan Fathi's writing. So Hassan Fathi wrote a play, a script for the theater. He called The Story of the Mishrabiyya. Here you can see two illustrations. The one on the left is how he imagined the stage to be designed. The one on the right is his sketch of the costumes of the different characters. And so from the title, you can see that it focuses on the idea or the element of the Mishrabiyya. The play it's quite complicated and has many layers. So it has two timelines. It has a timeline from medieval Egypt, and it has a timeline from his contemporary Egypt. And the themes that he tries to approach is the relationship of, let's say, modern architecture, contemporary architecture in his time with traditional elements, traditional design. And the relationship, it turns out in the story, is not as straightforward, even though Hassan Fathi is a proponent of traditional architecture and kind of saving traditional crafts. Through the story, through the conflict of different characters, you can see that the relationship is not as straightforward. It's not as simple as let's go back to history. And I think the fact that he has different characters representing different ideas who engage in dialogue really brings out the conflict and the complexity of the related ideas. Hassan Fathi also has another story called the story of Utopia, or قصة Utopia, where it's a man and a woman that walk from city to city, and the cities are described in terms of their color, like the red city, the green city, the blue city, and each city represents a kind of architecture or a kind of environment, built environment, in search of utopia. And so it's a philosophical story. So as they go along, they notice things around them, they think about their environment, they think about where they want to go. And you can really extract a lot of philosophical ideas and architectural ideas from the journey, from the city they start into, where they almost reach utopia, but never do. Okay, so that was just to say that the book is part of a long tradition of writing stories in order to make architectural ideas more apparent or accessible. And finally, here, this is the context of, let's say, space as metaphor. So this is wider than architecture, to say that writers have used spatial metaphors in order to make ideas clear. So instead of explaining an idea abstractly, they choose a metaphor for space, and then they make that spatial condition a way of explaining their idea. So the most famous example of this is Plato's allegory of the cave. So in very simple terms, in order for Plato to explain his idea of, let's say, true enlightenment or philosophical enlightenment, or the difference between kind of living in the world of, let's say, shadows or copies or imitations, and the world of ideas and true knowledge, he uses the metaphor of the cave. So outside the cave, where we have the sun and we have kind of all the real objects of life, this becomes the realm of enlightenment, of knowledge, of kind of true philosophical knowledge. And then inside the cave is the realm of darkness, the realm of shadows, the realm of ignorance. And so he can kind of just explain that as a philosopher, or he can explain it as a storyteller, and uses the metaphor of the cave, and after that becomes a perhaps more effective way of telling of explaining the idea. Other more contemporary writers have done similar things. So George Perec, in Life, a User's Manual, uses the spatial metaphor or the spatial condition of the Parisian apartment building, and he structures the book accordingly. So the book has many chapters. Each chapter is in a room in that apartment building. And so as you go through the book, you move from room to room in that apartment. So sometimes you're in the bathroom, sometimes you're in the living room, sometimes you're in the corridor, sometimes you're in the staircase, sometimes. And as you move from room to room, you see basically Parisian society. You see the rich people, you see the poor people, you see the lucky people, you see the unlucky people, you see the old, you see the young, you see. So in order to maybe give us a glimpse, a cross-section of Parisian society at a certain time. Perec uses the apartment building and the specific arrangement of spaces in the apartment building as a way of explaining, of showing us a cross-section of Parisian society. Also, we have a book by Abdul Hakim Qasim called قدر الغرف المقبضة, or The Fate of the Oppressive Rooms. And it is a book where we get the life story of the main character kind of as they move along life. But instead of describing what happens to that person directly, the author it's focused on the rooms that they are in. So instead of saying exactly what happened in terms of action or dialogue, they mostly describe the environment. So sometimes they describe a room in poor condition, and that's how we know that this character is not enjoying, is not prospering at that time. Sometimes you suddenly see that the author is describing a prison cell, and that's how you know that the person has been imprisoned as a, if I remember correctly, a political prisoner. And then later they go from room to room to room. And so here, instead of telling you the story of the person, the author tells you the story of the rooms that they have occupied in their life. And through the rooms, you understand what they want. So this was my way of kind of, even though the book is perhaps a strange book, so it has an artwork on the top. It takes you in a journey of 63 rooms. It tries to make philosophical points, tries to make architectural points. It tries to be literary also. Through these three contexts, I tried to say that maybe it's not as strange or out of the blue as it might seem. It does have precedence in literature, in philosophy, in architectural theory, in architectural thinking, design. And so this was my kind of summary of the main ideas of the book. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get the chance to read the book. And if you do, please share your thoughts with me. Thank you.